He's not only wonderful at offering deep prayer, but he is one heck of a good cook. And what an honor it was to be invited to the Imler's home and eat this delicious meal that Pastor Denny prepared. It was wonderful. So thank you, Pastor Denny. Thank you, Bill and Donna Lou, for your hospitality. Earlier in the service, we joined our voices together in this prayer of St. Patrick, and I went on the internet, the source of all wisdom, to find out a little bit more about St. Patrick, and I did not realize that St. Patrick was a man of very, very deep prayer, and I had been thinking about that all week, and it was amazing how opportunities for prayer continued to occur in some very interesting ways. As I mentioned, on Friday, the confirmation students and their mentors attended Akduth Veshalom Temple, and we had the opportunity to worship with their fellowship and to be with them. And Rabbi Lenny Sarko was so welcoming, and he spent time with the youth. Now, I know our confirmation students are here and some of our mentors. So do you remember the words of greeting that our Jewish brothers and sisters shared with each other? Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, they would say to each other. And I thought that was just wonderful. Shabbat meaning rest or Sabbath, and Shalom, we translate it peace. It really has a much denser meaning than that. Shalom not only has a sense of peace, but a sense of completeness and fulfillment in it. So Shabbat Shalom. So I'm going to invite you, you don't have to get up, just turn to your neighbor and greet them with Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, that's enough. And so as we were sitting in the midst of this service, and we were sharing Shabbat Shalom with one another, we participated in the service by reciting prayers out of the Jewish prayer book that they used. And I don't know why I'm surprised at what God does, but I knew, of course, that the scripture text for this morning would have to do with the narrow door. Jesus teaching about the narrow door. And so I was so surprised at this prayer that came up in our Shabbat service. And I'm going to invite you to join with me and think about the narrow door and yet what we were praying on Friday night. Join me in this prayer. May the door of this synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship. May it welcome all who have cares to unburden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture. May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity. May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or old straying feet. May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness. May this synagogue be, for all who enter, the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life. Amen. And so as we prayed out of this Jewish prayer book, I found myself thinking, do you suppose Jesus prayed a prayer like this? Do you suppose there was a time when he was in a Shabbat service where they shared words like this? Do you suppose that words like this might have been on the mind and in the heart of Jesus as he spoke about doors? Jesus is teaching, and he says, strive to enter through the narrow door, for many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able. Why? Why do you think that is so? Or maybe the question for us is, so who is really in control of the door? An interesting question. Jesus says the owner of the house shut the door. So when we hear those words, we might say to ourselves, well, I know this is a parable, and if I'm going to talk about the owner of the house shutting the door, then who might we say shuts the door? God. So on the one hand, we could say God controls the door. That would be a fair answer. But then as I thought about it, I remembered a very famous painting. You remember this one? So who's knocking on the door? All together, come, Jesus, yeah. And of course, the thing about the versions of this painting are Jesus is knocking, but what do we not see on the door? There's no handle. There's no latch. There's no lock on Jesus' side of the door. Because in fact, the reality, the artist's interpretation is sharing that the handle on the door is on our side. So we could also say that another understanding is that the door is ours to open. Maybe there is a paradox here, or maybe there is a synergy here that says, on the one hand, God is active in our relationship with Him. God has expectations. With God, there is a sense of accountability about that door. But we too are active in what happens at that door. God has expectations, but we have free will. Jesus stands at the door of our hearts, the door of our lives, the door of the opportunity to follow Him and to be His disciple, but the latch to the door is on our side. And sometimes when I think of this picture, sometimes I think too often we see Jesus on one side and us on the other side, and most of the time we'd rather just leave the door closed and kind of talk through the door. We'd kind of live our lives like we're going to put that glass up to the door. Haven't you done that? We're going to listen through the door. We hear Him. Maybe we hear Him. Maybe we hear Him through Scripture. We hear Him. Maybe we even have a little window in our door, just like that one. We see Him, but we're not quite sure we're ready to open that door. We're not quite sure we're ready for that journey. We want to hear Him. We might even want a window. We're not sure we want to open that door. That could be too much Jesus for us. Strive to enter through the narrow door. For many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able. Is the not entering through the door about God, or is it about me and the choices that I make and the priorities that I set? I think Jesus in this parable is teaching us that discipleship is not easy. True discipleship and the path of following Jesus is demanding. And that's often a hard one to preach. Don't want to scare the people off. And yet, I look back, I remember, if I have one regret, it is that I did not play in the band in high school. I mean, seriously. I watched my younger sisters who followed after me play in the band at New Haven High School. Now, this was many years ago, but when the girls were in the marching band, Mr. Paul Milliman was the band director. I'm seeing some nods. He was the band director at New Haven. Doug's, yeah. And I used to hear him come home, and they were whining, and they were complaining because he was so demanding. And they had to go up to Camp Potawatomi, was it? Those were in the old days, I think, when they'd go up for 2 weeks of band camp, and it was hot, and you've never heard so much whining in your whole life. But you know what? They were good, and they got invited to play all kinds of amazing places. And when it came right down to it, everybody wanted to be in the band because they were good. And they rose to the occasion. And it was exciting to be part of something that made a difference. And I think down deep in our souls and down deep in our hearts, we want to believe that Jesus Christ makes a difference. And we want to be part of something that makes a difference in the world around us. It is not that much is demanded from us by Christ. Everything is demanded from us. We are called by Jesus into a way of life that is extraordinary. We are called to a way of life where faith is known by its fruit. And when I thought about that, it reminded me a number of years ago, there was a book that was very popular with pastors in many churches. I don't know if you used it here. It's by Bishop Robert Schinese, and the title of it was The 5 Practices of Fruitful Congregations. Does that ring a bell? The 5 Practices of Fruitful Congregations. And while these practices are 5 important ones for congregations, I think they are absolutely the 5 practices of fruitful disciples. Or it could just as easily have been the 5 practices of those who enter through the narrow door. And so the practices on a very basic level were the practices of hospitality, worship, faith development, mission and service, and generosity. Those were the 5. But here was the thing that was the real hook with Bishop Schinese, and it was that these are 5 good practices, and most churches would say, they do these. I mean, what church doesn't think that they're hospitable? But Bishop Schinese took it one step further, because what really gave the idea of fruitful practices their punch were the adjectives that he added in front of them. You see, it wasn't just a matter of doing hospitality. Followers of Jesus offer radical hospitality. It wasn't just a matter of coming together with worship. I think all churches do that, right? But he said it should be passionate worship. It's not just that we practice faith development, it's that it is intentional faith development. It's not just that we practice mission work, which you talked about, Pastor Denny. He says it's risk-taking mission and service. And the last one, he said, it's not just about generosity, it is extravagant generosity. The path to and through the narrow door has to do with radical, passionate, radical discipleship, passionate discipleship, risk-taking discipleship, intentional discipleship, and extravagant discipleship. And what's really interesting is you could move those adjectives all around, because extravagant isn't just about generosity. It's kind of fun when you think about it. It's extravagant hospitality. It's radical faith development. It's risk-taking generosity. They're interchangeable. You know, Mother Teresa once said something, and this is my paraphrase. She said something to the effect that true discipleship and changing the world is not necessarily about doing big things. That most of the time it's about doing small things, faithful small things over and over. And we get what she's talking about because it says that we all have the capability to make a difference. But I'm going to throw this out, but on the other hand, for me, sometimes it's easy for me to hear her words and keep my discipleship within small things. To keep my giving within small things. To keep my actions within small things, because I keep them in those places where I'm in control and it's safe. Sometimes we can use that as an excuse for doing what God calls us to do that is intentional, that is extravagant, that is risk-taking, that is passionate, that is radical. Sometimes it gets us in the way of doing a big thing. I'm going to try to share a quick story with you. Some of you have heard this before because to me it was a powerful experience. It was an experience where I wondered why I was the pastor of the church and this lay leader wasn't pastoring the church, because what he said was so profound that it took my breath away. So I had been appointed to a church, and the first year I was there, we had one high school student that went to summer camp, and at that time the church was offering half scholarships. So you can do the math. Most of our week-long summer church camps here in Indiana run about $450 for the week, all right? So the church would offer half scholarships. Years, they had one kid. How many kids would go? One kid would go. And for some reason, after a couple of years and feeling some momentum in the church, I said, hey, let's do something big. Why don't we send 25 kids to camp on half scholarship? And after I said it, I thought, why did I do that? You know, I'm trying to set them up for success. We don't even have 25 kids. And besides, and here's the ultimate decision maker in all theological discussion, I'm not sure we can afford it. You know how that goes? Well, I'm sitting there, I'm going, $225 times 25 kids. So Tony, and actually I can tell this for some of you who were here a couple of weeks ago, Tony came and visited. He was sitting in the back row over here. I think, Dick, you met him. He sat behind you. Tony, who happened to be the finance chair at that point, came to my office. He says, Pastor Cheryl, we just got together and planned next year's budget. And we heard what you said. So we've budgeted $5,000 for 25 scholarships. And I thought, oh, darn, they were listening. That next year, we sent 25 kids to camp on half scholarships. Well, we're pretty stinking proud of ourselves on that. Well, another year goes by, and crazy Tony, the finance chair, is now chair of the church council. And we had a leadership meeting, and Tony says, I got an idea. You know, we've been sending 25 kids to camp on half scholarship. I think next year we should send 50 kids to camp. And the group said, really? And Tony said, well, yeah, it shouldn't be any big deal because we've already got 25 kids going to camp. And all we have to do is ask them to invite a friend. Oh, no, Tony wasn't done. And the friend is going to go. You know why the friend's going to go? Because we're going to give the friend a full scholarship. I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we going to afford it? And actually, what was interesting, that wasn't the first thing that came out of their mouths. Mind you, this is a small leadership. We're supposed to be in charge of this ship, right? That wasn't even the first thing that came out of their mouth. The first thing that came out of their mouth was, how is that going to go over with the church if their children are only getting A, but the friend is getting... And Crazy Tony says, don't you think that's a great way to teach our young people discipleship and extravagant generosity? And of course, we had to sit there, and I thought, why isn't he the pastor? Oh, Crazy Tony wasn't done. He says, all right, if this is going to be an issue, I've got a solution. We'll just give all 50 kids full scholarships. My mental calculator is just... I'm like, let's see. 5 years ago, we offered one kid a $200 scholarship, and now you're thinking we're going to pay $20,000 for scholarships? I don't know how it happened. It did. The money came. The kids went. And last summer, Community United Methodist Church sent 72 kids to church camp on full scholarships. I respect Mother Teresa. I get what she was saying. But sometimes we have to have the courage to be radical, to be extravagant, to be risk-taking, to be intentional, to be whatever that fifth one is I forgot. Strive to enter through the narrow door. For many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able. One of the things that we have not mentioned is concern for people in New Zealand. And this week, Dr. North sent me a prayer that you had come across, and I'm going to invite us again to pray. And this is the Lord's Prayer as it appears in the prayer book in New Zealand. So we will close this time of message by sharing the Lord's Prayer together. Women will start. Let us pray. Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God who is in heaven, with the bread we need for today, feed us. In the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and testing, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen.